Hi, everybody. I am Matt with K15T, and welcome to our live stream where we will be talking about importing content into Confluence. If you ever tried to do this, what an adventure. If you haven't, well, join with us as we do some very fun adventuring. Hi, everybody in the live chat. It's nice to see you, Ada. Thanks for joining. Everybody who jumps in, if you wouldn't mind. Oh, stop, Ada. Yeah, the hair is good today. I did the whole procedure yesterday to wash it. It's a whole thing now. You have to say a seance. But you know, the results are quite nice. Good morning from Oklahoma City. Y'all, if you wouldn't mind hitting that like button, that would be awesome. That is good for growing algorithms. Also, if you haven't hit the subscribe button, go ahead. Morning, Barb. Oh, I hope it's nice and warm there. That sounds lovely. Hey, Jaden. Nice having you all here. Y'all, also, at any time, if you have a question or a comment, you want us to explore something, you want us to talk about something, if you wouldn't mind writing #question and then whatever you want to say. That helps me as I'm monitoring the chat, trying to keep up with all of you, because we have a very, very engaged chat. Also, if you haven't yet, if you go to k15t.com/learn, you can subscribe to our weekly Confluence newsletter, which is slowly branching out into all the Teamwork Collection apps as well as Rovo. So if you haven't done that, join with us as we continue to learn about all those things. Good morning from San Diego and Chicago. Oh, San Diego, nice and early there. Well, I hope you have a coffee. Morning from hello from South Africa. Y'all, it's so good to have you here. All right. Throw the questions in the chat with #question. Hit that like button if you haven't, just as we get things going. And I keep saying we, and that is because joining me, of course, is Chris, our editor-in-chief. I just learned that it's not and. Hey, Chris.
Hello.
It's great to have you on the live stream again. Chris, you love imports, right? That's what I heard.
Yeah, gray imports mostly.
How many imports, like not just talking about Confluence, but just like how many imports have you done from like system to system, or just like migrations, like that sort of thing?
A lot. Actually, my tech writing career properly started with migrating mainframe documentation from AIT to Confluence and from mainframe to Confluence. And I don't know, 7, 8 maybe.
Oof. Wow. Okay. All right. I have done, let's see, I've done Google Docs to Confluence. I've done Word to Dida, and then Dida to Confluence. Not as many, but it's not the quantity that matters. It's the quality that matters. And that is what we're going to talk about today. So y'all, we are going to talk a lot about best practices here, because there are so many things to consider. And as you do more and more data imports, you kind of like pick up on these things. So we're going to spend about 30 minutes of like, I don't want to say we're going to be preaching at you, but we're going to be telling you the good news about about how to import content really successfully. And then about 30 minutes in, we're going to try some vibe coding. So we are going to, thanks for subscribing, Gus. We are going to be jumping into Google's Gemini, and we're going to try to vibe code an app that will help us with the import process. And you can see me mess that up live. It'll be pretty great. So again, if you haven't hit the like button on the stream, please do that to make Google happy. So, Chris, why would anyone do this? Like, why are we importing stuff into Confluence to begin with?
Well, first of all, if the most obvious reason is if you have more knowledge centers or sources of truth, you don't really have a source of truth, because eventually people will start to create their own copies. You have people sharing various documents. You don't really have a control over what's going on where, and you end up in a mess. So that's one reason: create a single source of truth. With that comes better governance, so you can have a dedicated or a single dedicated process to create and maintain documentation. In other words, you can build your documentation strategy and life cycle of your documentation around a single tool rather than many, which simplifies things for everybody who's involved, from if you work with developers or subject matter experts through your own work as a tech writer, to QA, to publishing. Having a single tool to deal with is always an advantage for yourself, for your IT or DevOps department. You don't have to pay 5 licenses. And eventually, you'll have happier readers if they can access that single web portal, even if it may have more subsections to it, if you have more products. But there's a single point where they can go and read documentation and maybe interact with you depending on what kind of tool you're using, what kind of website you have. So that would be the most common reasoning behind migrating everything into single source. Confluence, it's because Confluence, from my point of view, is really easy to work with when it comes to getting content into, although that depends on how you do it.
As
And
we've learned.
another reason could be that you you already have a single tool that you maintain and manage your documentation as such, but you're not happy with that. And maybe it doesn't meet your expectations anymore. You need to change your ways. It's old, you don't like it, and you won't want to move to something else. I just a couple of days ago I talked to a friend. They migrating from Docker Code solution to Adobe Experience Manager, I think. So yeah,
Oof. Okay.
they're
Yeah.
just not happy with that. Need to change their ways, and
Yeah.
that's why they're doing migration.
So I think this is really interesting, and I want to pull up my browser here with 2 articles you've written recently. This is why, y'all, you should subscribe to our newsletter, because we are writing some really fantastic content in there. By the way, I'm using Dia browser here from Atlassian, and one of the things that's pretty new in it is side-by-side viewing, which is kind of cool. I think you can do that in Chrome as well. They're all Chromium, but yeah, if you haven't checked out Dia and you're using Mac OS, definitely do, because it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Chris, you're talking about single source of truth. You're talking about, consolidation. I guess, like, for me, I have this question in my mind, like, yeah, but doesn't AI fix this, right? Like, if we're using Copilot search and we've connected that to Confluence and we've connected it to SharePoint and we've connected it to Google Workspace, do we need this does single source of truth still mean single tool? And why are you talking to us about moving everything into Confluence in issue 116 when in issue 114 you talk all about how you can connect things from other systems into Confluence? Explain yourself, sir.
Okay. Yes, it may sound contradictory in a way. On the other hand, that Bond villain over there that says the Confluence is only the beginning. Yeah, the point there was you may have content formats that are not kind of page based.
Okay.
And as an example, I said, okay, you might have a PDF that needs to be a PDF for various reasons, or it needs to sit in a specific place for various reasons. But the format that you really cannot transfer well into any formats that Confluence offers is our presentations, your slides, your PowerPoints,
Yeah.
where you create it for a reason as a presentation, and getting that into sort of a text-based form for Confluence might not necessarily work well. It can be done, but I mean, if you already have a presentation and you have content there that was created specifically for that format conversion might not bring any value to your readers. Spreadsheets. if you have a giant Google, what they call it, Google Sheet, with data that you need to update externally, again, for whatever reason, you have Confluence tables, but again, tables were not built to display complex
No.
spreadsheets, and then you might have all sorts of functions in there. So that sort of thing is best served outside of Confluence, but there are ways how to bring it in. And again, you will have that consumer side or reader side single source of truth. Although for the specific formats, the actual authoring and maintenance will happen elsewhere. So that's one thing. And the issue 116, yes, that's a proper migration and consolidation of your knowledge.
And so your point is, okay, tools like smart link embeds or uploading the PDF or, dropping the Google Sheet in with an embed or even dropping a video in, that is good for those things that should be presented outside of the way Confluence would present something. But for just the vast amount of your knowledge, you're saying dump it all in Confluence. All of it belongs. All your content are belong to Confluence. Is that what you're saying?
I think my connection or somewhere something's happening. I didn't get the whole question,
Oh yeah,
but yes, if we're talking about proper documentation, whether it's a product documentation, technical documentation, or your internal documentation for your HR, your finances, your legal procedures. Having everything in Confluence means better governance over what's happening and better workflow control
yeah.
or lifecycle management of your documentation if it's everything in Confluence.
Okay. All right. So y'all, the reason Chris and I wanted to talk about this is a really important messaging to give to leadership. Because as we talked about in our last stream all about Rovo and building agents, a lot of leadership is being pushed to push AI, which is cool. But we also need to keep our wits about us. So one of the things we need to keep in mind is that just because there are connectors and there are MCP servers that you allow us to connect our tools using to our AI tools, that doesn't mean that the need to migrate to a single source of truth or a single system disappears. In fact, in some ways, that might actually even amplify that need. I'm not I'm not going to say that one way or the other, but this is important. We need to be able to talk to leadership, when we're saying, okay, y'all are going all in on the Atlassian tool set, so we need to get stuff into Confluence. We need to be able to say why, because just connecting Rovo to SharePoint so you can search stuff is not the same as bringing it all into Confluence. It's a very different thing. So keep your wits about you because there will be pushback because there's a lot of strong marketing that is saying use this AI tool connected to your things. All your problems are solved. Not necessarily. And even Chris, you talked about happy readers. It's cool that I can use Rovo search to search my Google Drive, but I want all of it in Confluence. I want to just read all the things in Confluence, unless it's a spreadsheet. And then I want it to be smart link embedded into a page in Confluence. I want it all to be there. And you talked about a migration game plan, and I'm going to show this really stellar graphic. We're kind of into scrolls here. So Chris, did you make this with generative AI?
Of course.
Okay. First of all, the first thought I had when I opened this was, oh my God, it can do words now. Do you remember? Do you remember what text used to look like that came out of some of these tools? It was just so weird, but it can do it. Hey, friend from Riverside, California, thank you for joining. Hey, y'all, if you haven't yet hit the like button, that would be fantastic. Yeah, Chris is vibe coding now and doing all sorts of AI crazy stuff. So, of course, this is AI generated. I shouldn't have even doubted it. So, Chris, you've created the content commandments. Let's talk through these because I think these are really important for any team. Let's focus first on creating a content inventory.
Okay, so example from my previous job, the company was the result of fusion of four different entities, and each came with its own doc set,
Mm,
not necessarily just one. So it was important to figure out what's where, what's relevant, what isn't relevant, and just to get the sense of what kind of volume we're talking about for migration, whether that's relevant or not for future documentation, and what sort of systems are being used to maintain that or create that, or basically where it lives, and then act accordingly.
yeah,
So
yeah.
just taking stock of the situation as with anything, so we can actually start planning for this.
And additionally, you also you also need to think about who owns that particular tool where that lives, who has admin access, um, does it have any sort of import export ability? Like when at one point I worked for a networking company, a large internet backbone company, and there were systems that were just like hand built. There was one that was because they would acquire, smaller networking companies. There was one tool that was built in Microsoft Access using Visual Basic for Applications, VBA code, and they had built this app. And, I was a network planner and I had told someone, hey, I need documentation on this location. They're like, oh, it's in this tool. And they send me this link to this thing. And it's like, we'll log in to access. And I was like, well, how do I do that? And they're like, oh, well, Dave built this. Dave gives out the access. And I was like, okay, cool. How do I reach out to Dave? And they were like, well, he's no longer with the company. And I was like, okay, do I have read only access? Like, Dave's gone. So essentially, I had to find someone who had an account for this home baked system. And then, like, I don't know if they gave me a PDF of the info or what. We scraped it out somehow, but um, the existing content that you have can be all over the place. So know who owns it. Are there any IT security requirements around that content? Like all of that stuff is important to take into account, especially considering the size of your organization. All right, how do we decide what to
Yeah,
migrate, Chris?
and
Oh, go ahead.
well, this kind of matters too, because these everything is connected over here. So you may end up with you take the inventory and you realize that you have two versions of the same thing, maintained by two different teams, and each claims that this is the latest of latest version of documentation, which can easily happen, especially when people change, people leave. You have some proprietary solutions, or it just organization kind of disintegrates, and your workflow falls apart, and everybody starts to doing their own thing because they cannot rely on anybody in the company to maintain that.
Yeah.
But deciding what to migrate is, of course, is it still relevant? Will it be relevant by the time we finish this? And then there are tiny little details where usually compromises start. For example, you have documentation in tool A and it's versioned. So you have 1.2, 1.5, 6, 7, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to migrate all historic versions, just a couple of last versions, or just the latest version and start anew? That's something that if you do versioning, semantic versioning, that's something that you need to make a decision about. And my advice in that case would be migrate the last version and start from scratch in the new tool, because unless you develop perfect transition tool or migration tool, you will run into problems. And that for that big migration that we did with the team back at CA Technologies, I think we were only migrating the latest, the newest, the shiniest version, and kept everything in the old system as a sort of a legacy for legacy access, or it generated PDFs and made them available. Because the time spent, expenses spent, and the sheer complexity of migrating versions from one versioning system that was XML based into something else was just unimaginable. And we're
Yeah.
talking about hundreds of thousands of pages, if not millions. So decision was taken just the last version from every single product. So
Which is so good. And one thing you might encounter when you're like, we want to just do the most recent version or most recent version of all the product documentation, you might have support say, no, don't do that because we are officially supporting these past versions of the software. In that case, see if you can come up with a compromise. Like, first of all, find out, are we talking like one or two customers left using this older version? If so, distribute PDFs to them, right? Print it out, bind it up, put a hand painted cover on it, and mail it to them. It's still going to be cheaper than building a custom tool that imports in all of those. So like, don't just say, well, we decided we would support these older versions. Like, think about it from a cost perspective. Like, okay, what does that actually mean to support these? Can we distribute this in another way? And typically the answer is yes, even if that means, for them, we leave the old content just up. The old help site is up, or something like that. All right, talk to me about cleaning up content before you move, Chris.
Okay, in documentation, you would typically have your chapters or parts that are there for legacy reasons, not necessarily versions, but some supporting materials that go back years ago. Maybe tutorials that you keep there because somebody might still be using them. That's something that you not necessarily need. Then you need to go through your documentation and make sure that it's as consistent in terms of formatting and styles as possible. You need to make it as uniform as really humanly possible. And if that documentation has been in development for years, you will find differences because even if you have your editorial guidelines and you have your style book, people change, product changes, and there will be a shift towards something, I don't know, more modern. Best practices might change, and you realize you don't want to do or redo all the old sections that you haven't been touched for years but are still relevant. But for migration, you want to have your content as uniform as possible, and it doesn't matter if you do migration manually or if you have a migrate or you have some sort of a conversion tool. The more uniform the content, the easier migration would be. That's just a rule. So try to clean up, do the housekeeping before you start migration. And it's also the good opportunity to do your, again, micro inventory of what you have, what's still relevant, what can be left behind. And also by doing this, you are sort of lowering the volume of what you need to migrate, which is always beneficial. Again, doesn't matter what sort of migration tool you would be using. The fewer the pages you need to move over, the better.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
again, it's sort of it's about aligning styles and structure. If you know what you're migrating into and you know that some features are not supported, for example, Matt, our favorite example is a numbered list in a table that's in a table.
Yes.
It does happen, but your new tool might not support that. Not to mention that it's really bad writing practice to have that sort of nesting.
Yes. Also terrible
Try
for
to simplify
accessibility.
what you have.
Yeah.
If you have 16 fonts for or displaying code blocks, and I don't mean the specific language or syntax coloring, just a different monospace font sizing, as again, speaking from experience happened, go with the single one. It doesn't matter if your code is 11 or 10 point sized, just unified.
Yeah, yeah, and this totally goes along with the commandment to align, aligning styles and structures. This also is very helpful because um, you can create a test plan. By the way, y'all in the chat, if you have any questions, use hashtag question and ask us, or comments or whatever. We'd like to hear from you. Y'all are sleepy, and we should be sleeping when we're talking about content migration. Although I hear that. Um, when you're looking through your existing content and you're like, okay, we see these common things. There's tables, there's headings, there's code blocks, like whatever. Document those, and you can use those to create kind of a validation plan that you can then go back at the very end of your migration and say, okay, I know that these sample pages have these different elements. What do they look like in Confluence? Did they come over? Did we reformat them and clean them up? It's a nice way to take an inventory of what you have, clean up that formatting, of course, get rid of stuff that you don't need, and then come back with that same, armed with that same info and like test it, see did you do the thing. All right, Chris, talk to me about picking the right import and export methods, because that's the big one.
Yes. Essentially, two ways: either create your conversion tool or migration tool, meaning you export something from the source tool, run it through the your customized tooling, conversion tooling, and then import it into your target CMS. In case of Confluence, it is possible to do it programmatically. I mean, you do your API tricks, and then you move content from one place to another. You can have a conversion tool, meaning, again, example from AIT, we exported XML, ran a conversion tool that created a Confluence XML, so we could import it into a Confluence server back then. And it worked with some post-migration cleanup, but you can do it like this. But sometimes creating a tool, and it doesn't matter if you have if you have means to do it programmatically, or you have resources. Sometimes the easiest way is to do the good old fashioned copy paste from one tool to another.
Uh-huh. Yeah, especially also you said earlier API tricks. You can use API tricks. If anybody is working at an organization where there's pretty solid info security teams, they're going to be like, no API tricks for you. You're not touching my Confluence like that. Like so. Yeah, sometimes copy and paste is like, well, this is the first thing we have. I've copy and pasted a good many things, and even that involves sometimes a fair amount of cleanup depending on what you're copying from.
Oh yeah, but I mean, frankly, I was in a situation where copy pasting 500 pages was the fastest option because we tried all sorts of importers and conversion tools, tried to use AI, and after a while we realized that it's easier to do copy pasting compared to creating our own tool because it's a one-off operation. We won't be doing it ever again from that specific tool.
Yeah.
And as you do copy pasting, you are sort of in control of what you copy, what you leave out, in a way, and then you can do you need to do your post migration sanity check anyway. So essentially, you are kind of doing two in one as you copy paste the content. And
Mm-hmm,
again,
mm-hmm.
no matter what kind of tool you use, you always need to do post migration checkup or sanity check. So rather than speculating about, or vibe coding for 2 weeks, a tool that would do it for you, you might as well just, go pick a shovel and do it manually.
Yes, Barb is bemoaning what we've been talking about so far in the chat, and Shavato actually mentioned that this is fantastic for those folks who keep getting content in leading caps style. You can use the case change tool in Word, Shift F3, which is fantastic to like fix the case of the content before you paste it into Confluence. That is such a great tip, Shavato. Um, I have a question from Barb before we wrap up this list. Even copy and paste from Word after removing all the formatting still seems to pull in funky line breaks or non-breaking line formats into Confluence. Any tips to avoiding that? Um, and God, the Confluence editor has a non-breaking line sickness, is all I have to say. The amount of times it has tried to insert non-breaking lines, even when I'm just typing stuff in, I'm like, no, don't. Any tips there, Chris?
Yes. What I found out that worked for me when copying from Microsoft Word is copy paste through, not kidding, Google Docs. I don't know what yeah, yes, it sounds ridiculous, but it worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening is that I think Google Docs just strips unnecessary elements from what's being copied, and then the when you copy what you just got into in Google Docs and paste it to your Confluence page, it's usually much clearer and requires far fewer edits and formatting corrections. So that's one thing. What really worked best for me is if I could get a hold of static HTML website generated from that content,
Mm-hmm.
because I realized that Confluence is really good in interpreting static HTML content into Confluence page format, and that's how I moved those 500 pages. Well, actually, there was an intern to do that, but
Mm-hmm.
it it went from a static HTML website into Confluence, and it was really straightforward job. Even stuff like note boxes were converted properly most of the time,
Oh, that's excellent.
or notes from one side to another, and they came up as a Confluence node, which was amazing.
Another, I mean, maybe probably everybody on here are power users, and you already know this, but Command or Control Shift V is paste without formatting. If you're pasting something unstructured, like paragraphs and things, that's a great way to ensure that you're not bringing over any kind of wonky formatting. That will not work if you're pasting like a table, because then it'll just drop it in as a bunch of ugly text. Um, Ann Sanders believes that Google Docs are now superior than Word, more superior. And I remember when I was in university, I remember when they rolled out this thing called Google Docs. I was taking a class in Office 2003. I was required to take 2 classes to learn the Microsoft applications. And I was like, this web based document thing, oh, it's cool. But like Office 2003 has the ribbon, which actually a lot of people were very upset about the ribbon. Somebody said, Fruit Lover Lady says, we copy and paste chunks of training manuals into Confluence from Word, but it never seems to be able to paste pictures in one big chunk along with the words. Yep, that's a problem. Okay, wow. We have so much comments about Word. At least in Word, you can insert paragraphs and images within a numbered list. Oof, burn, Barb. True. I think Confluence still struggles with that.
You can
Uh,
do that in Confluence.
can you
Like
now? Can you now?
talking, we're talking about inserting images in lists.
Yes, without messing up the numbers. Like inserting an image. I think if you do Shift Enter, you
Yes,
drop
exactly.
below, then you can add your image, Barb. That's right. And then Shift, no, then Enter,
No,
return,
yeah.
and then you've got your next number. Yes, it is possible. That's right. Get to the end of your bullet or number and your list item and hit Shift Enter or Shift Return. We've done it. The soft return. Yes, thank you, Barb. All right, finally, really quick, and then we'll like do some vibe coding, see what happens. Chris, the final step, deprecating old resources.
Okay, so in the case you let's say that you migrate only the latest version and you have the you have older version that you want to support, then obviously you need to maintain that, at least make it accessible to
Mm-hmm.
existing users. But eventually you need to either hide it and make it really available only upon request for specific use cases, or deprecate it altogether because you don't want people to visit the outdated resource. So obviously setting up redirects, these sort of things, you need to really work with your customers to tell them, okay, now we have this new content format, we have a new website, or don't be surprised. Basically, just talk to your users that things changed, and plan for deprecation. And with deprecation, you need to have, even if it's internal documentation, you need to have your PR campaign among your users to tell them that things are changing, where to find new resources, or who to contact if they need to access the old content, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah,
But eventually, you need to deprecate that so it no longer lives online, doesn't confuse search engines, and that sort of thing.
yeah. And some like, more hacky things you can do. Certainly, if something's online, you can just redirect a URL. That's cool. But if something lives in an old SharePoint or something, some techniques that you can use because people are still searching there, right? Maybe they're still searching there. They're still going for that old Word doc. Go through the whole Word doc and mark all the text as crossed out. Just change the formatting so the content will still show up in search results. Show that it's crossed out, and then just have big links throughout that document, maybe in the header and footer of the document that say, this is now deprecated, go here, right? And do that for a good 6 months, because just throwing up announcement banners, life is full of announcement banners and no one pays attention to those. So if you can't just redirect, right? Or if there is something out there that lots of things that still link to that you can't just redirect, try things like that to point people to the new thing while still keeping the content there. Because some systems are so old, there isn't the concept of archival, right? Or redirects or those sorts of things. Things were built prior to us linking all the things. All right, y'all. Stefan in the chat just mentioned there is a new Rovo skill for reading images. That is interesting to point out. Stefan, there was a chat about adding images to things. That's new. I want to play around with that skill. Okay, so while we are chatting about a post-migration sanity check and like the things you need to do post-migration, y'all, if you want to throw in the chat, I would love to know what are some of the things you do to do a post-migration cleanup, because that's the crux of it. Can we move stuff? Can we clean it up so that it's actually like presentable and moldable in Confluence? We're going to talk about this for a tiny bit, Chris, because we're already behind schedule, and then we're going to jump into Gemini and talk about the conversion tools that we built or tried to build. So, Chris, can you talk a little bit about what are some of the sanity checks teams should be running through after copying and pasting from Word, using a tool, using the API? What should we be looking at?
Making sure that everything that you wanted to migrate got migrated, especially when you're using some sort of automation. What can happen if there is an inconsistency? Obviously, the algorithm will skip that or mess it up because it's not prepared for this eventuality. And again, I experienced chunks of like a whole sections of documentation missing because of tiny little things. So content consistency, links. What often happens is that links, hyperlinks in documentation will point to the original source, which will always happen if you do manual copy paste. So you need to fix that. But it can also happen with automated tooling, that not everything gets sort of translated, and any formattings, that sort of thing. What also may happen as you go through the content in a new source, that you realize that the old structure doesn't make sense anymore. So you may realize that rearranging things, which is really easy in Confluence, might help your documentation going forward, and this can be a part of the cleanup, like a revamping structure, for example. I can easily see that, because once you see documentation stripped of the old legacy content that you no longer need, you like literally see the light and suddenly realize, okay, if I do it like if I change the structure or if I move this section over there, it will serve users better. That you get now that you get a freedom of moving stuff freely in Confluence, suddenly you have more options. Use migration opportunity to refactor your documentation if you feel like it would help.
Absolutely. And that navigation changes can also include things like, if you just moved like your HR handbook, go through and like, yeah, add new macros. There's formatting macros that are special for Confluence. There's a table of contents macro. Also, like you can add banners and emoji to pages to make them easier to navigate in the content tree and in search results and when you're actually viewing the page. So don't just consider the written content. Also, like make sure the images have alt text and captions, these sorts of things. It's more than just the content tree and the space everything's in, but also how do you navigate the content? Does it feel right to users? All right, y'all, I am looking at the comments. We do not have any comments. You all just want me to jump in and look at Gemini, which I understand. Here's what Chris and I did, because we were like, okay, so we want to know, can we, in the age of AI, vibe code something? Chris and I are both absolute professional amateur vibe coders. We've logged tens of minutes of vibe coding at this point, right, Chris?
Yes.
So if you haven't vibe coded, this is a pretty, like, really, really cool thing. So you can use your AI tool of choice. I've used Gemini here. They all have a model that is made for working with code. We use the Pro model, so it's 3.1 Pro as of the time of this live stream. But use what's approved by your company. Please do not put sensitive company data into your personal AI tool. That would not be good. And this is how we started, because we were like, okay, well, we could do an XML conversion. Maybe we could try API, maybe HTML. And I mean, I think, Chris, didn't we were like, okay, an API conversion would be great, right? Like have something that could scrape our content and just dump it right into Confluence using the Atlassian API.
That was one of the options. The other option was to create a XML conversion tool,
Yes.
which I think Gemini actually quoted what we wrote before, like years ago, that you can do it, but it's not a recommended path unless you know exactly what you're doing. And yeah, don't do that. Was basically the final advice. Try something else.
Yes. Yes. So let me show you this conversation we had with Gemini, because the way you start vibe coding is you start having a conversation as if you were speaking with an engineer on your team, as an example. So I said, I'm looking to code a tool that scrapes an HTML site that I own. I specified I own it. Because sometimes if you're like, I want to scrape some content, like, do you want to buy a watch style? And the AI tool will be like, no, we're not allowed to do that. And then it'll kind of shut you down. So, that seemed important context. And yeah, I actually said, could I get it in Atlassian document format? Just like straight up, that is the format that the Atlassian platform stores written content in. And I gave it the link to ADF, so that it could like look at what the structure of that XML based format and ask two questions, right? Like, it'd be cool if it could run completely on my local machine, so I don't have to purchase software licenses or pester, IT to set up a server for me or something. And then also mentioned that Confluence Cloud supports HTML importing. So wondered, like, can this tool actually, like, my question was, could it get all the content and then package it up as if it was a Confluence space? Because you can do that, right? You could export a space from Confluence and it's a big collection of XML files, and then you can import it into another Confluence cloud. Or, is the thing you're going to dump out going to be HTML? Or could it dump out some kind of more basic XML? So like Chris said, it was a really fantastic and collaborative experience with it talking with us about like how we could do it, right? So converting to HTML to ADF could be incredibly useful. So it talked about architecturally, how could we do this? So, yep, running it completely in the browser on your local machine is totally possible. And then it talked about, okay, here is a hurdle. So it talked about how the scraping would be done. So approach A, we could create a browser extension, or approach B, do some local file processing. So like if you have a way to download all the HTML files, do that. And then, yeah, this is when it was like, it is highly recommended that you do not package the tool's output as a space export. It's very interesting how sort of opinionated it was. Like it described reverse engineering the XML structure of a Confluence space export to inject your own pages is incredibly difficult and notoriously brittle. So we decided not to go with the notoriously brittle approach. And then it gave us the alternative, right? So it was like, use the REST API, which we were like, okay, yeah, that would be cool if we had access to the REST API. But we're assuming we're in an enterprise where like, that's just not an option for us. The team is like, no, absolutely not. So instead, alternative 2 was to zip a clean HTML and use the HTML importer in Confluence. And that is what we did. So it summarized it, and then it went after it, and it started to create things. So again, y'all, if you have any questions in the chat, let me know. And Chris, do you have anything to add? I know I'm just rambling at the moment.
Not at this stage.
Okay. Then I'll keep rambling because we have 12 minutes for me to ramble. So, but another thing that we realized as we were talking about this, oh yes, and this also gave us the some more options there. At first, we were like, oh, well, let's see if we can do a CSV import. So at first we were like, let's make a tool that can do that. Then we realized there is no way to import a CSV in a Confluence Cloud, only HTML. One thing that we noticed is this right here. It actually pointed out, hey, don't forget, every page needs to have a unique title within a Confluence space, which is so cool. Additionally, we were like, hey, can you figure out the hierarchy of the site that you're crawling? And it let us know that if the URLs are, oh God, what's the word for that? If the URLs are
identical?
No, with structure.
Hierarchical.
Hierarchical. Thank you, Chris. I was like, I know it's a mess of syllables. Then it was like, yeah, we probably can do this. And then it walks you through, here's all the files we need to create for this extension, blah, blah, blah. So if you all have not vibe coded before, I would highly recommend it because it's like working with an engineering teammate. It's super, super cool. It even talks, about how it's going to clean up content. And then it starts giving you can see the files that it creates. And we started building an actual Chrome extension that actually handles duplicates. So we told it like, hey, if you find a duplicate page title as you're exporting, just append a 1 to it or a number to it. And so it worked that into the script. So I don't need to walk you through this entire conversation, but the fact is, Chris and I discovered that, the exporting to structured content didn't work. So then we were like, okay, would you rewrite it so it's an HTML exporter instead? And we'll give that a try. So what I would like to do for y'all is I'm going to do a new chat with Gemini, and I'm going to switch to the Pro model. So that's the one that handles code well. And I am going to grab the prompt that we threw in there to get what we created. And I'm trying to find, there's my browser with the prompt. Because one of the things you can do at the end of a long conversation with an AI tool is you can say, hey, we just talked about a whole bunch of stuff. Would you give me that prompt, please? Like summarize the whole thing so I can do it again. So I'm going to grab it from the Confluence editor over here and paste it right in. Okay, so I've just pasted a whole thing. I need you to write a Chrome extension, manifest version 3, that scrapes a website based on its sitemap, downloads its media, and packages everything into a Confluence-ready HTML zip file. And then this is all, all the instructions for how it should build this thing. And this was based on a long conversation Chris and I had. Now that I have this summary, at any time, I can go back to any AI tool and say, make this again. So I'm going to throw that to Gemini. It might take a minute. We
May I
shall
say
see.
something while what?
Yes, please do, Chris.
So what really helped me with this exercise, and anytime I'm trying to wipe code anything, is the advice that I got years ago from member of a patent review board. I was asked if I have a functioning prototype, and I said no, I don't have one because I'm not a developer, so I cannot code anything. And this guy told me, and it was a triple-time senior distinguished engineer, and he said, you don't need a working prototype, but you need to be able to describe your invention in such a way that an engineer can build it or developer can code it. And what it meant for me as a technical writer was, okay, when I'm writing instructions, I need to be able to write them in a way that whoever I'm talking to can understand what it needs to do. And I really remember that advice when we're trying to communicate with Gemini to wipe code this thing, that yes, you need to be able to tell that machine what you want to do in the most precise terms.
Yeah.
So you need to have first clarity of what you want to achieve, and then translate it to something that the engineer, developer, or one that comprises just ones and zeros can understand and turn into something useful.
Absolutely. And the nice thing is, y'all, especially if you're doing technical communication, any kind of documentation work, you've already been building up the perfect skill set to do exactly this. Like, you're probably talking with engineers or the people who are the business analysts, the people who understand like what are the processes. You're talking in more technical, detailed terms anyway. So you have a perfect skill set to come right to Gemini and say like, here it is, here's the edge cases, here's the, duplicate names, you need to handle these things. And this is great because the more context we give in a prompt, the better. So speaking of, here's the prompt. So you can say, first of all, Gemini will praise you all the time. Fantastic use case for the blah, blah, blah. Like Gemini has been the kindest coworker I've ever worked with. It's kind of ridiculous. So here it starts giving you the code. So and it tells you need to make some new files on your desktop, and it's giving us all the code. There's a few different ones. You can read through and it will actually it's telling you what these are. This hidden page loads the JZip library. I don't know exactly what that means, but I know that it's something. Right here it all is, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to copy and paste this because I already have a prepared casserole in the oven to show you. It's pop-up HTML, blah, blah, blah. Next steps. It's like, would you like me to walk you through the process of handling authentication methods? Right? You can also say like, nope, this is good. Show me how to like load this extension into Chrome so I can try it. So check this out. Here are the files. So this is just my file explorer. I just like opened a text editor on my Mac, saved one as background.js, copied and pasted the code in. There it is. Here's the JZip file that it told me to make. What does that mean? I don't know. I know it's JZip. Here's the manifest. This is the file that tells Chrome, hey, here's my scraper thing, and here's the permissions that it needs. Here's the off-screen HTML file, blah, blah, blah. And look at this one, actually, we can look at. This is the little pop-up that it made. So it made this little UI. So when you're in Chrome and you click the scraper icon, this opens up in a little dialog and you hit start scraping. And one of the amazing things was Chris and I told it like, hey, please indicate how far along the process you are. And it actually put a loading bar right in to tell you, how far along that it was. In fact, even when you closed it, on the little icon for the scraper plugin, there was a little loading bar to show you the process, which was incredible. We were also monitoring our system resources. I have this beefy MacBook Pro. Chris has a MacBook Air. And we were like, okay, is this just going to crash this machine because it's just slowly churning through, scraping these pages, building HTML? But actually, Chrome seems to manage the resources really well. So, while Chris's ran a little slower than mine, Chrome made sure that like it's not, just crashing the machine. There weren't crazy, like, I don't know, memory leaks and junk. It just worked. The only thing we really had to do was like go back to Gemini and say like, hey, okay, like, yeah, give us a loading bar, please. And then when we were like, yeah, we need the HTML output instead of CSV, it also rewrote that. It was really, really cool. And Barb mentioned she's using this method of vibe coding to write macros for Word to help prep content for migration, like a macro that removes all image borders. That's pretty fantastic, Barb. Whoa, I would love to look into that. That sounds really, really cool.
I was actually for that migration from mainframe. I was creating macros in Notepad Plus and Microsoft Word, just doing recording what I was doing and creating macros from that, exactly to convert specific formats or syntax from mainframe sort of a style into something that our XML conversion tool could process. So yeah, it's a and now with vibe coding, these macros, yeah, perfect path to take.
Yes, yes. And since we're running out of time, I would love to show this in action, but of course I can't. But Chris, would you just summarize quickly, what did we experience? We got an HTML output from this tool. What did we experience when we tried to import
Yeah,
it
so
into Confluence?
we tried to scrape a couple of pages. It did work. We got HTML files for everything. We got a folder with image files, and we tried to import it into Confluence. Results were mixed, put it this way. The content was there, the text-based content was there, but formatting was all over the place. And again, it was different. It depended on what kind of formatting was used on the sort of a donor website. We couldn't get images to work. There were placeholders, but for some reason, the way how the exported HTML was structured, it wasn't something that Confluence could import as a unit, as a page. So basically, images were left behind. But I think that with more tweaking and maybe working with examples of what HTML output Confluence produces, we could be able to create an HTML that resembles what Confluence expects more closely.
Yes, yes. And one of the things
that
go ahead.
The importer in Confluence is still in beta, so again, your mileage may vary. As a first attempt, it wasn't bad. Put it this way.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the things that you could do that we didn't is you could go, show it, get a couple of example pages from your source content and say, and like literally, if you just go to the page and you left click and say inspect, you can grab the HTML code from the entire page. So you could right click, grab that entire body. It's a bunch of HTML code. Go to, find 6 different example pages of the different types of content you might import and drop that into Gemini and say, these are the types of pages I want to import. And then, you could literally import, grab 6 of those and then grab the same 6 pages in Confluence after you've done a test import and say, okay, here are the pages that I use the tool to get. Here's how they import into Confluence. Can you suggest any changes or improvements we would make to the scraper itself to improve the final product that ends up in Confluence? it might be able to look through and say, oh, I see that I could have scraped this, or I could have output it in a different way that it might appear better in Confluence. That's something Chris and I didn't even get to do. And by the way, I wanted to show you, here's our extension right here. So you can see it opens, and I'm on just this page. I'm going to say start scraping, and it's looking for the sitemaps, and there it goes. It's off to the races. It is scraping our entire site. And if I close it, there it is. It says it's at 3% right now, 4%. So that's just chugging away. I'm going to stop that because I don't want it to crash the live stream because it might overburden my CPU. But like, this is what we can vibe code, y'all. So have a look at these tools. Think about it. Think about what you might be able to code up, even if you hand a working prototype to an engineer to say, hey, I've got this 80% of the way. I did the 10% of the thinking work, 80% of the coding is done. Could you give me the last 10% to get us to the point where we can move this into Confluence? Yeah, check it out. If you have any questions, drop them into the comments on the recording of this video. We will respond to those. If you haven't already, go to k15t.com/learn and subscribe to our weekly Confluence newsletter. We are talking about AI. We are talking about documentation. We were talking about Confluence and the Teamwork Collection and Rovo. It's all over the place these days. Also, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, we are live streaming more and more, as y'all seem to be really interested in all the stuff we are also really interested in. So please join us. Chris, thanks so much for joining. Let's do this again and talk about something else that's interesting to those of us who care so deeply about knowledge.
Sure. One more thing, we have a page dedicated to this this stream where we'll share the prompts in a PDF format and some of the high-level best practices for migration.
Awesome. Yes, and we will drop that in the description for this video, so y'all can come back to get it. Also, if you want to reference this at any point, you can use the same YouTube link to check out the recording of this. It's there. Share it with your friends. Share it with your bosses. Share it with your family. Check out everything we have on YouTube. Go to k15t.com/learn to check out all our written articles and guides. There's a huge documentation guide that would help you in the rest of the process. Please check that out. We've spent a long time working on that. We would love to continue to share resources as we are learning. Check it all out and join us as we continue to explore how to use Confluence to share what you do best. Bye, everybody.
Bye.